Look at this picture. The Real Madrid players swarm the referee, protesting furiously, convinced they have been wronged. Amid the noisy chaos, Carlo Ancelotti stands silently, motionless, like a solitary figure adrift in a sea of people. For all these years, whether in victory or defeat, he has remained composed. But tonight, the emotion in his eyes seems to go beyond joy or sorrow. It is pure, crushing loneliness. If I had been there, I would have wanted to give Ancelotti a hug, just to ease some of that emptiness. Because after this night of failure, what awaits Carlo Ancelotti other than the cold verdict of dismissal? His son, David Ancelotti, his right-hand man and greatest pride, will likely leave too to embark on his own path. And just like the old guard who once stood by Sir Alex Ferguson, the trusted staff around Ancelotti will soon scatter. Tomorrow, after this humiliating defeat, an email might arrive blunt and emotionless, ending his contract. Carlo will then have one final conversation with the Brazilian delegation to finalize his appointment as the new head coach of the national team. Real Madrid has long decided not to keep him. And after all the ruins left behind tonight, Ancelotti will have no reason to stay in Spain. But could a single phone call from Florentino Perez persuade him to stay? The whole world knows that will never happen after a loss to Barcelona. It is time for Carlo Ancelotti to pack his bags and board the first flight to South America, where samba rhythms, wild football, and a generation of stars are waiting for him to write the next chapter of his career. Every legend needs a defining moment to close their final chapter, and this year Hansi Flick chose Real Madrid and Ancelotti to carve his own place in history. Barcelona's 3-0 demolition of Real Madrid was not just a victory, it was an overwhelming conquest in tactics, personnel, and spirit. Flick did not just beat Carlo, he executed a true Flick, flipping the career of a legend right on the stage of the Bernabéu. The reality is already quite clear. Representatives of the Brazilian Football Federation were in Seville to meet Ancelotti, offering him two choices: leave immediately or wait until the end of the season. The deal between Ancelotti and Brazil is sealed. The ending is inevitable. But the question remains, is Florentino Perez making the right decision by letting a loyal servant like Carlo Ancelotti walk away? Or perhaps there simply was no other way. On social media, especially Twitter, the Madridista community is split in half. One side mourns his departure while the other insists that it is time for change. Half the fans argue that Real Madrid is throwing him away like a squeezed lemon, while the other half marvels at how unusually patient Florentino Perez has been. In the Perez of old, Ancelotti would have been dismissed long ago, especially with all three major season objectives slipping away. However, it would be grossly unfair to judge Carlo Ancelotti's legacy at Santiago Bernabéu solely by 3 defeats to Barcelona. Because legacy, after all, is not just measured by the number of trophies. It is what lingers in people's hearts, the moments, the memories, the emotions. And through that lens, Ancelotti has given more than anyone could have imagined. He led Real Madrid through turbulent years, when legends departed one by one and the locker room fractured under hidden battles for power. It was Ancelotti's calmness and patience that preserved Madrid's pure fighting spirit, a spirit where players fought for the badge on their chest. Everyone remembers the legendary Decima of 2014, but few recall that Ancelotti was the one who laid the first stone for the post-Ronaldo generation at Madrid. He patiently rebuilt the team, placed Benzema at its heart, and nurtured stars like Vinicius, Rodrigo, and Camavinga. During times when Real Madrid was no longer a ruthless machine, Ancelotti chose to step back, patiently developing young talent, accepting their mistakes rather than painting grand philosophies. The Champions League triumph in 2022 did not come from dominant displays, but from ironclad resilience, the very spirit Ancelotti instilled. Humble yet determined, not flashy, but cold-blooded enough to win. And because he remained so composed in a football world growing more savage, Ancelotti gradually became an outlier. As he closes his final chapter at the Bernabéu, what Carlo leaves behind is not a glorious dynasty like Zidane or Mourinho. It is a quiet whisper. Once, Real Madrid conquered without noise, without destruction. Only perseverance and belief were enough to write history. But like footprints in the sand before a rising tide, all will soon be washed away, living only in the memories of those who witnessed it. A quiet teacher, proudly walking with this great club through days of both glory and pain. If Ancelotti had left a year ago, perhaps he would have been celebrated even more. However, to be fair, Carlo Ancelotti still departs with the dignity of a champion. Across 5 years split into 2 spells at Madrid, he brought home 1 La Liga title, 2 Champions League crowns, 2 UEFA Super Cups, 1 Copa del Rey, 2 FIFA Club World Cups, and 1 Spanish Super Cup. Those numbers, measured against the vast history of Real Madrid, are enough to confirm that Ancelotti stands among the most successful managers to ever lead the royal club. No long speeches were needed, no hastily built statues either. Carlo Ancelotti leaves behind his legacy in the simplest way, quietly, patiently, yet eternally. The generational transition at Real Madrid, from the likes of Marcelo and Varane to Eder Militao, Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo, was completed under Ancelotti's steady hand. A task not every manager would have had the courage or composure to handle. He ensured that Real Madrid never collapsed into crisis, never lost its traditional identity amid constant upheaval. If Zinedine Zidane is remembered as a symbol of glorious triumphs, then Ancelotti is the master craftsman, tirelessly fine-tuning every cog so that the great machine called Real Madrid kept running as smoothly as possible. He was not a blazing fire, but the quiet keeper who made sure the flame never went out. Compared to the dazzling eras of other dynasties, Ancelotti's legacy might not shine as brightly, but for those who have lived through the cold, ruthless years of modern football, they will understand. Some victories do not need noise. Some heroes do not seek the spotlight, and some managers walk slowly but travel incredibly far. Carlo Ancelotti leaves behind a Real Madrid that is younger, more flexible, and more resilient, a squad that knows how to handle the pressure at the very top and how to survive the harshest moments, a legacy that does not need grand displays but one that endures, the kind of gift any coach would dream of leaving before they say farewell. This year, Carlo Ancelotti is only 65 years old, still relatively young when compared to legends like Sir Alex Ferguson, Ottmar Hitzfeld, or Giovanni Trapattoni during their final years. Coaching into the 70s is not unusual, but because Carlo spent nearly his entire career in the most intense cauldrons of Europe, from Milan, Chelsea, Paris Saint-Germain, Real Madrid to Bayern Munich, he has hardly had a true moment to pause and breathe. He dedicated his life to cities stifled by pressure and expectation, places where victory is demanded and failure can crush anyone not strong enough to endure. Now, leaving the glitter of Madrid behind, Ancelotti will fly to Brazil, the land of golden sunshine, street football, and children who play for joy rather than survival. There he will find a football culture where the philosophy of simply playing together still thrives. Instinctive runs, spontaneous passes, matches played for pure joy rather than meticulous calculation. A freer, more open world that Madrid can no longer offer him. Brazil will give Ancelotti the air to breathe, the freedom to create, and the forgiveness needed for a man who has grown wary after decades of relentless battles. The vibrant, passionate, and forgiving style of Brazilian football will suit an Ancelotti who seeks not just results, but joy once more. There, his unstructured, free-flowing football will have the chance to blossom again, where players find each other naturally on the pitch rather than being shackled by rigid tactics. And a sincere piece of advice to Carleto: say goodbye to Twitter. Do not let the harsh words from a fraction of Real Madrid's fan base wound your spirit. In Madrid, people love fiercely but forget just as quickly. In Brazil, where every match is a festival, he will rediscover himself, not as a tired old general burdened by wars, but as a teacher of pure happiness. Who knows? Maybe this journey is not a farewell, but a new beginning, a true rebirth for Carlo Ancelotti.